When people first started gushing about the now smash hit rap musical sensation Hamilton, I have to admit I was excited to learn more. I love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I love rap music. You should hear me rock some Eminem and Macklemore at karaoke sometime. I love musicals, and of course, I love when people do an original take on an old idea or an idea that presents new opportunities that didn't exist before. And then they finally put up a stage recording on Disney Plus, and it was fine. Okay, wait, put down the pitchforks and torches, okay? I still love Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I still love the rap music, even though I do feel like some of the best songs were cut from the final show, which is a real shame, but I'll come back to that later. Oh, and of course, I do agree that it was absolutely groundbreaking to cast all Black actors in a story that was basically invented to mythologize the founding of America by a bunch of white dudes. And it was exactly the perpetuation of that mythos which caused Hamilton to leave a bad taste in my mouth. I'll summarize my feelings like this. While it is groundbreaking to have an all black cast in a show produced on this scale, there's nothing about the way the story of Hamilton was written challenges this long standing mythos Americans have made up for themselves. Like a piece of stone polished smooth by the tide, from the time of the American Revolution until now, people living in the United States have refined and polished their own superhero story. I guess the people who the cast of Hamilton were based on were kind of like some kind of old-timey Justice League, only much more boring. Not that I'm insulting the characterization or any of the actors, of course, but like, the Justice League has aliens, so clearly more exciting. Anyway, while I think most adults with a sliver of sense understand that the whole George Washington and the Founding Fathers, bomb ass name for a band, someone use that if they haven't already. This story is based on history, but over the years has become a mythos of exclusively the greatest moments, often simplified and sometimes outright fabricated. Yet still, no one is willing to challenge it. No one is willing to portray the story much closer to reality. Sure, maybe we're a little more willing to talk about the enslaved people and the real impact of generational trauma created and reinforced by the men so many white Americans call their heroes. The very best, like no one ever was, but that's not really enough. One of the biggest problems with the people currently in power is they fail to learn from history because they're not learning real history. They're learning a comic book version of their country's past. So, with all that being said, let's talk about National Treasure. National Treasure, which came out in 2004, is what I would describe as an action adventure heist movie starring Nicolas Cage in one of his most sane roles. Don't get me wrong, I love Nicolas Cage and his breadth of roles. In fact, I would probably count him among my top 10 Hollywood actors. When I was a teenager, I saw Ghost Rider in theaters 5 separate times. And it also stars Sean Bean as the main antagonist. The spoiler-free summary of the film's plot is that Nicolas Cage is descended from a family of treasure hunters who are desperate to find a cache of lost treasure. In this universe, all the founding fathers of America were actually Freemasons, the secret society, who had been placed in charge of protecting this massive amount of gold and gems. And where did they hide the map to find it all? On the back of the Declaration of Independence. Of course, Nicolas Cage's character Ben is an altruist who wants to find the treasure to share the knowledge and all the wealth, and also bring honor to his family's name after they've been mocked for generations by historical societies for believing Templar's treasure actually exists. Apparently, one of the qualifications for being a serious historian is your ability to effectively mock people straight to their face. They leave that one off the job application to keep you on your toes. I call this a heist movie and not a treasure hunt movie because even though they are looking for a treasure, I would say that the structure of this movie is much more Ocean's 11 than it is Indiana Jones. I mean, obviously, there are elements of both. Like, the third of the movie spent stealing the Declaration of Independence is a lot more like Ocean's 11. And then the third of the movie, where they're trying to chase down the rest of the clues, is a lot more like Indiana Jones. And as for the final third of the movie, well, you'll just have to stick around and find out. At the same time, it's also an extremely lighthearted movie. Nicolas Cage plays a charming, witty, and highly intelligent character who has a comic relief sidekick, an enemies to lovers romantic plotline with who is basically the movie's only female character, and he has a sarcastic curmudgeon of a father played by Jon Voight. If you couldn't tell by how relatively little I've talked about the story in my summary of this movie, it's because there isn't really a lot more to it. But that's not a bad thing. It's a fun movie, it's an action movie, and it's a movie that I think clips along at a really nice pace. I don't know about you guys, I'm just saying. Plus, there's always delight in the smaller details. At a runtime of 2 hours and 11 minutes, National Treasure would have been considered a pretty long movie for its time, especially as a family movie produced by Disney. I saw this movie in the theater when I was a kid, a preteen, I guess. And apparently, out of Nicolas Cage, Sean Bean, and Justin Bartha, the one I fell in love with was Nicolas Cage. The heart wants what it wants, I suppose. I love the post Pirates of the Caribbean adventure style plot, and I adore the vaguely supernatural flavor sprinkled over the American mythos of the founding fathers. Now, this is the kind of interpretation I can get behind. The movie starts with Nicolas Cage's character, Benjamin Franklin Gates, who I will be from here on outward referring to as just Ben. As a little kid, listening with rapt attention to his grandfather explain the secret treasure protected by the Freemasons. He tells Ben that the reason their family knows the true story is because one of their ancestors worked for the founding fathers and was given a secret message to deliver between them, a message that's a clue to find the map that will reveal the treasure's location. It's at this point that, like, younger looking John Voight bursts in and chastises both Ben and his own father for believing in fairy tales, and he goes on about how every member of the Gates family bankrupted themselves chasing after this mythological treasure. He also emphasizes that this has made them the laughing stock of the general world of historical enthusiasts, I guess. We'll come back to this. Smash cut to grown-up Nicolas Cage out in what looks like the Arctic, riding a big Kubota vehicle alongside many other men, including Sean Bean. It's established pretty quickly that Ben had partnered with Sean Bean because he needed money, and not only did Sean Bean, I'm not using his character's name, provide money, but also a team of men to do a lot of the difficult work required to get to all these random places where the clues are hidden. They arrive at and excavate this huge old-timey ship, like a galleon or something, and they expect the treasure to be inside, but all they find is a whole bunch of old barrels filled with gunpowder. That is until Ben finds a box that contains an ivory pipe with letters engraved on it, and when you put some kind of ink, well, Ben uses blood, but anyway, on the pipe and then roll it on a piece of paper, it gives you a message, and that message is the next clue. Ben does some, we'll call it Sherlock kind of reasoning, where he talks out the answer to this riddle and figures out that the map to the treasure is hidden on the Declaration of Independence. We're about 17 minutes into the movie. Following some discussion, they realize they'll never be allowed to look at the Declaration of Independence. Sean Bean then confesses to Nicolas Cage that he and his crew used to do illegal jobs that may or may not have involved theft, and if no one is going to let them look at the declaration with permission, then they need to steal it. Of course, Ben refuses to agree to the plan, and after some more back and forth, Sean Bean pulls a rather predictable betrayal and orders his men to shoot Ben and Riley so they can go steal the declaration themselves. There's a standoff, blah, blah, blah. Our hero and his sidekick narrowly escape a massive explosion. Smash cut back to Washington, D.C. When the FBI won't take their tip about somebody trying to steal the Declaration of Independence seriously, they decide to try going to the National Archive where, all the people who care about historical documents work and try to convince someone there. And that is where they meet Dr. Abigail Chase, who I guess is in charge of preservation. She flirts a little bit with Ben, but of course, she doesn't believe their story either. Since they can't get help from anyone in the government, and knowing Sean Bean is going to steal and destroy the document trying to get the map because he isn't a super intelligent chemist who understands how to make the message appear, Ben decides that the only way to protect the Declaration of Independence from being stolen is to steal it himself. And here's where we get our first Ocean's 11 scene. If this isn't direct homage to Ocean's 11, I literally don't know what is. Riley takes Ben to the National Library where he explains every single security measure around the Declaration. Ben parries all this explanation by telling him that all they need to do is get it into the preservation room. So now we cut back and forth between scenes of Ben getting ready to go to this historical gala, which is taking place in the same place as the Declaration is stored at whichever monument, I can't remember. And Riley, who is doing all the techie, computery, camera-y stuff. Then we start cutting between those scenes and shots of Sean Bean and his crew breaking into the building through the back by force. So you're getting this sort of like, very demure version with like sneaking and fingerprints and figuring out codes, and then you have these other guys just like blowing up the doors. It's all exciting music that continues to swell and swell and swell until Riley's video feed goes out because Sean Bean's team and his tech guy cut the video feed to attach their own video feed thing. Yeah. Cue a fight scene, Ben escaping from Sean Bean's men with the Declaration, only for an extremely awkward scene that takes place in the gift shop. I understand people find this kind of thing funny, but not only do I not do the whole second-hand embarrassment humor well, I also don't like the caricature of a black woman they made this actress play. And here's the mandatory car chase sequence. Cutting to the chase a little bit here, the FBI have a lead on who stole the Declaration by getting his name off the credit card slip after the interaction with the woman in the gift shop. And they go to his house, which obviously he's not there now. His house is all like set up kind of looking like a meth lab with all the tarps and stuff because he was planning on having to run all these chemical tests to see what kind of invisible ink was used to write on the back of the Declaration. And then also they find this stack of photocopied letters that he was looking at from somebody named Silence Dogood. Of course, Ben ends up explaining fairly shortly after this that Silence Dogood was actually just a pen name used by Benjamin Franklin when he was a child and writing prank letters to his brother's newspaper. And I guess these things were like kept and stored as like historical documentation. Like literally there's a fucking child's prank in a museum somewhere. At the same time, Ben, Riley, and Abigail show up at John Voight's house because it's the only safe place Ben can think of. They bicker about how to safely test the document while hiding it from John Voight, since the first thing he said was they better not be there because of the Templar treasure. Eventually, they settle on lemon juice and a hairdryer, which react with the invisible ink to give them a cipher. The cipher corresponds with the Silence Do-Good letters to spell something based on the page number, line number, and letter number. However, when Ben asks his dad for the letters, John Voight says he already donated them to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. That prompts Ben, Riley, and Abigail to pack up and leave with the FBI hot on their trail. Oh, and not only are they being pursued by law enforcement, but also Sean Bean and his men are following them because they're not smart enough to figure out the clues on their own. Possibly also because they're all British. So I'm just gonna pause here to point out that every single clue in this movie, from the ones they've already found to the ones they're gonna find later, they all make the founding fathers look super cool and super smart. Ben and Riley both frequently emphasize to the other characters about how these men were technically traitors. They were doing what was right in spite of what the law said that they could do. All the preserved items that they look at were owned by white men, and there isn't a single mention of the contribution made by Black people to the construction of all of these buildings. They also really sidestep how the founding fathers did absolutely nothing to change anything about the enslavement process that was imported by the British and the French and the Dutch. And yeah, it was a lot, right? And they had the opportunity to change this stuff once they overthrew the kingdom, and or was it queendom at the time? Anyways, when they overthrew the British, they had their chance to change it, and they chose not to. Remember how I said that my favorite song from Hamilton was actually cut from the final show? Well, that song is Cabinet Battle number 3. And if I could get away with putting the whole thing in here, I absolutely would. It's awesome. But I am just going to put in a teeny bit, hopefully, of this amazing animatic that somebody made because it really helps visualize the feelings of the song.
The Constitution clearly states that the states have to wait until 1808 I'll tell the North that on January 1st of that year will ban importation handling the worst. Once again, all this agreed upon, I'll pick up a pen and introduce a motion never to discuss this again. Madison, execute your plan to the letter. Let's hope the next generation thinks of something better.
On many levels, they are not revering great people. I'm not going to make a Paul Revere joke here, I swear. At the same time, National Treasure isn't exactly trying to deliver a message to society or portray history particularly accurately. It did not break any barriers, and it certainly did not invent an entirely new genre of musical. It's telling a story that sort of semi approaches the supernatural, mostly for kids or adults or cryptids who are children at heart. They just sprinkle in a couple facts about America's history for flavor. Anyway, back to the movie. In Philadelphia, we find ourselves inside the Benjamin Franklin Institute, where a kid in a school uniform is examining an exhibit containing the Silence Do Good letters. It's clear he's counting based on the cipher on the back of the declaration. He runs outside once he has a full word and finds Riley sitting across the street. Riley gives him some money and the last set of numbers, and we get to see most of the message hidden in the lines. But then, oh no, Sean Bean is there! Oh no, he notices the kid who's counting numbers! Luckily, a well-timed bus stops in front of Riley, and he notices an ad for the place where you can see the Liberty Bell, and it turns out the message referred to the Liberty Bell. Meanwhile, Ben and Abigail are in some department store buying new clothes because remember they were in formal gala attire. and flirt a little bit in the change rooms. Riley returns from collecting the clue about the Liberty Bell. Nicolas Cage explains how it appears on the $100 bill, which it turns out has the next clue. There's a clock tower that reveals an exact time to look at a shadow being cast on a roof that will point you to a brick that you need to pull out, and there will be another clue in there. I told you it was like Indiana Jones. Of course, the people who made Indiana Jones actually understood that casting a shadow in a specific spot would change based on the time of year that it is, and they created that scene with all the holes instead of just one hole. Anyways, never mind. Sean Bean is able to figure out that they need to go to the Liberty Bell by Googling the word they bought from the kid. So he ends up in the wrong place. They realize they're in the wrong place and rush up the tower where Ben is retrieving the next clue. A pair of glasses with colored lenses, and looking through them finally reveals the hidden image on the back of the Declaration of Independence. But oh no, Sean Bean's men found them. They realize they probably won't get out without getting seen, so Nicolas Cage takes the empty tube that did have the Declaration in it and the glasses and splits off from Abigail and Riley, who have the Declaration in the inner part of the case. Basically, he knows that Sean Bean can't access the treasure unless he has both of those things together. Another mandatory chase sequence. Actually, two, if you count that Ben has one and Abigail and Riley have one, and they're cutting between them. Ben just kind of runs fast and then outsmarts one of Sean Bean's henchmen by doing some rooftop parkour, while Abigail and Riley run and end up hiding in a grocery store. I have thoughts about the portrayal of these two black characters who are basically there to sass the characters with a single line of dialogue. But I think all those thoughts can really just be boiled down to the fact that Hollywood was and still is very much racist. They're just racist, guys. Even though America was built on the backs of black women who took care of everybody, they're still reduced to stereotypes like the mammy, which is clearly being implied in this scene. In spite of them giving her, admittedly, what I think is a funny bit, she's an unnamed reduction, a human punchline delivery system. Listen, I can love and enjoy a movie and still be aware of and criticize its flaws. And speaking of flaws, our protagonist had a flawed plan because things start going bad real fast. First, in a rush to get away from Sean Bean's bald henchman, Abigail loses Riley and then crashes into another pedestrian and drops the tube with the Declaration in it. Conveniently, Sean Bean is right there to scoop it up. He lets them run away. Nicolas Cage is cornered on a rooftop by one of the gunmen. He tosses the empty document case and runs away. The second he gets back to where they parked, the FBI suddenly closes in and arrests him. Luckily, the other two see what happened from afar and they don't get caught. But yeah, the FBI agent who was at the gala and then at Nicolas Cage's character's house is now here and Ben is in handcuffs. Obviously, this main FBI agent guy interrogates Ben. Ben is 100% honest with them, which is obviously a really unbelievable story. But he does agree to work together to get the Declaration of Independence back from Sean Bean. When Sean Bean calls, he threatens to basically destroy the Declaration if they don't send in Ben alone. So, with a wire on, Ben goes to meet Sean Bean at a harbor, I think. Obviously, he's not there, but one of his men are, and with a diversion created by a helicopter and a signal jammer to avoid people listening to the instructions, they tell Ben what to do to escape the feds. He listens and ends up jumping off the harbor before the undercover agents can catch him, and a diver meets him in the water. Abigail ends up calling Ben and explains that in order to break him out of police custody, federal police custody, they needed a criminal, and the only criminal who they could think of to work with was Sean Bean. It's at this point that she also lets Ben know that in order to convince Sean Bean and his group of merry men to help them, she had to convince him that he could keep the entire treasure. So both she and Riley are hiding in this cafe across the street from where Sean Bean is waiting to meet up with Ben, But then, oh no! Sean Bean has pulled another completely unpredictable double cross. He's taken John Voight hostage now, and he's going to kill all of them if Ben doesn't help him get to the treasure. The all is lost moment. They, yes, all of them, follow the next two clues to end up underneath a church and then find a secret passage behind someone's tomb. Clearly, everything is super old, and even though there's a really cool ancient chandelier, the spiral staircase going down and down is all rotted out, and Sean Bean's main henchman guy falls to his death. Here's where we get what I assume is like a mandatory near death scene where something breaks and Ben falls, and then Abigail slips and the declaration slips and Ben catches her, and then, all of that, oh my God, what's going to happen? I do have to say though, when Nicolas Cage is the one holding on to the board and he's swinging above this giant hole, I do really enjoy the acting decision he makes, because they show that as he's clinging to this board, it's like, the nails are coming out and it's like peeling away, and he does this like eye roll kind of facial expression that you would expect somebody to make when they like lock themselves out of the house and not are about to plummet to their death. Alrighty then. I still love Nicolas Cage. Obviously, he's saved by some movie magic timing, and they all manage to get on the old elevator thingy, and they all go down, down, down to Hades Town. Sorry, no, they just go down. Sadly, when they get to the bottom, it's just a platform and an empty cave, and everyone's like, "Where's the treasure? The treasure is supposed to be here." And Ben is like, I guess it's gone. Somebody got here first. They must have moved it. It's like we're too late. Once they realize that there really is nothing there, Sean Bean and his henchmen book it back to the elevator and then move it out of the way so that Ben and the rest of them can't get on the elevator. Ben begs him not to leave them there, obviously, but Sean Bean doesn't give a shit. He's a ice cold killer, right? So then John Voight ends up being like, there's another clue. And Ben is like, Dad, no. And John Voight is like, it's okay, son. Like, we're gonna get through this or whatever. So John Voight goes on telling Sean Bean about how this busted old lantern that was basically the only thing in this empty cave was actually a clue that was a reference to the whole Paul Revere, one if by land, two if by sea. And John Voight says that one lantern, one if by land, the British were coming by land, therefore we have to go to Boston because, and then he gives some other historical reason for why they have to go to Boston. John Bean, however, just keeps the elevator moving. And when they're like, hey, come on, you might need us, there might be another clue, he's just like, oh, then I'll know where to find you. Basically, as soon as the villains are gone, Ben and his dad start looking around the cave. They're feeling around the walls, and Abigail asks what the heck is happening because the British invaded by sea, not by land. Ben says that Sean Bean's character didn't realize their trick because he's English, which I think is questionable because I understand that Americans are very like self-centered and they think that like their history should be known by everybody. But I do actually kind of feel like, considering this was American Revolution times overthrowing the British, that maybe British people would also have at least some knowledge, like at least a surface enough knowledge to know the whole one if by land, two if by sea story. He also explains that the Freemasons would not have built this secret room without a second exit in case of havens. So he's like, don't worry, there's another door through the treasure room. They find some Scooby Doo looking secret door, and Ben takes the torch and goes through the door, and the room is empty. Empty except for some moldy old skeletons. He's so sad, and everyone tries to comfort him, including John Voight, giving him a motivational speech about how even if the treasure isn't here, the real treasure was friendship all along. No, wait, I'm sorry. It's that they can keep looking for it. And also, he validated their entire family's legacy by finding a place where the treasure was once stored, therefore proving the treasure is real. Which I'm definitely not smart enough to know if that's the case, but I technically think that that's not true, right? Because there's no treasure there, just a cobwebby room. So, yes, this proves that the Templars maybe built a room under this weird church with all this secret tunnels and old-timey elevators and everything, but there's no trace of the treasure in this room. And I think this is something like uh is it correlation and causation or presumptive thinking or something like that. I don't know the term. Somebody tell me the term. I just don't think you can claim that something is proof that something exists just because something else exists. Riley helpfully points out that they can't keep looking for the treasure while they're stuck where they are. Ben says that there's definitely still a second exit, so they all start looking, and Ben finds a hole in the wall shaped like the pipe that they found at the very beginning of the movie, which he pushes in and opens another Scooby-Doo style secret door across the room. And it turns out Nicolas Cage was right. The other exit was through the treasure room. I have to admit, the shot of Ben putting his torch in the oil and lighting up this whole massive mansion-sized room full of treasure all through history and all around the world is very cool and still kind of took my breath away as an adult and as my 100th time watching it. Cut to them busting through another wall of the church as they get out through the second exit. Right away, Ben calls the FBI agent who's been chasing him the whole movie, and when he arrives, Ben just hands over the Declaration of Independence. They sit down to talk, and Ben also tells him they found the treasure, I guess to prove that he wasn't lying about everything, but also to try to get out of trouble with the law. The agent then gives an unexpected speech about the reason why the Knights Templar hid the treasure and why the Freemasons protect it to this day. And that's when Ben notices that Mr. FBI is wearing an Illuminati ring. Sorry, I guess it's supposed to be a Freemasons thing or a Templar thing, or is that all the same? Anyways, it's the thing with the eye, the all-seeing eye. What a twist! Yes, Ben, okay, what do you want in exchange for all of this? And Ben says he really doesn't want to go to jail. And Mr. FBI says, well, somebody has to go to jail. Cut to the FBI closing in on Sean Bean and some new henchmen in Boston because they're breaking into the place John Voight told them to go. I think it's a great way to wrap up the story of the antagonist. However, as Sean Bean is being pushed up against a cruiser, Nicolas Cage steps out of the shadows and strikes a smug pose. Did the FBI agents bring this random guy with them on like a helicopter to take them from Philadelphia to Boston? Who cleared this? How much paperwork was there? Why on earth would the movie concludes with Ben, Abigail, and Riley walking in some beautiful estate, with Riley complaining that Ben was offered 10% of the total value of the treasure, but he would only take 1%, which is shown to still be a lot. Riley gets into a Ferrari, and the camera zooms out to reveal that Ben has purchased a huge historical manor that had something to do with the founding fathers, and it's clear that he and Abigail are together now. The end! Look, as far as conclusions go, I don't really have one. I think that this is a great movie. I think you should watch it if you haven't. I think it's a really fun movie for just like an afternoon, maybe while you're doing chores or something. I don't know. The point I'm trying to make with a lot of these videos is that I think that we need a little more positivity around here. And even though positivity definitely gets fewer views than negativity does, like, man, if I just trashed like people and stuff, I'm sure my channel would do better. But I kind of don't want to. Like, I just really want to talk about stuff I love. That was kind of the whole point of making the channel. But anyway, if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so, so much for watching, for listening to me ramble about one of my favorite movies. I'm sure it's one of my favorites. And that's why I feel so guilty asking if you could like and subscribe, maybe if you liked this video. I know everybody is kind of baking these days and it's getting really off-putting, but it's also kind of the way that like you succeed on YouTube. And so I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop talking now. You guys have given me so much of your time and Thank you so much. I really, really, really am truly grateful. So stay happy and healthy. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.